Welcome to my channel. So if you need to contact me for any reason, for repairing a watch or just for advice, contact me at jdwatchservice@gmail.com and I'll get right back to you. So here today we have a railroad grade 21 jewel Hamilton pocket watch, and this little baby's got had a problem with the lower balance jewel. So in the previous video I showed you how I popped that lower balance jewel out of this hole right here that you're looking at, and went on my jewel hunt. So jewel hunting is not as much fun as it sounds, and you're not capturing and skinning and eating the jewel, by the way. So it's just looking for a jewel in a setting that will exactly fit the setting size, and then finding the jewel that's in the setting that is the right diameter. So that in a diameter of a lower balance jewel, this is where the pivot of the balance staff fits into that jewel, and the jewel is like a donut, and the donut is in that setting, and it has to be absolutely correct with respect to the end shake, or sorry, the side shake of that. So when you take the pivot and you've got that pivot sticking in that jewel hole, and if you were to move that balance staff from side to side, there would be minimal side shake in there. And then that balance staff, the pivot, goes through that jewel and it sort of tops out on the cap of that jewel. So there's a cap that goes on top of that as well. And the cap, the end of that balance staff will touch that cap jewel where a little bit of oil is, and that's end shake. So you have to have the right side shake and the right end shake to replace that jewel in the setting. So the jewel that we had in place before was extremely cracked. That's all I can say. There was just enough left of that donut hole to allow the watch to run, but everything around it was just shattered. It was in bad shape. A gentleman named Max gave me this watch to replace this lower balance jewel, and when I saw it and it was running really well, I was like, yeah, I don't think that lower balance jewel really has a problem. But then I got into the stereo microscope and took a look, and I was like, oh my God, that is bad. That was moments away from destroying that pivot, probably, or just not running. So this is what we're going to do. So today I'm just going to show you the process I go through to replace this. If I can't find a setting that fits in here, but I can find the right jewel, then I have to go ahead and make a setting to hold that jewel in place. And I have some videos I've made on how to make a jewel setting. That is very difficult. It's not as simple as you might think, only because the depth of that setting is critical. So as the setting sort of drops into that hole here, it has to drop a distance that allows that end shake to be right. So the pivot has to go into that hole and then touch the cap jewel so that you've got perfect end shake on that. So I had another watch I was fixing for a gentleman named Bori. I've got two of his watches right now. One of them is actually working perfectly. The other one works, but it has an end shake issue, I believe, because the setting I had replaced it with had too much of the collar wasn't shallow enough to allow this the setting to actually drop down enough to allow the pivot to come through the hole enough. So at certain positions that pivot would want to come out of that hole. So I have to do lathe work on that one to actually refine that jewel setting to get that end shake perfect. So that's a bit more work on that particular watch to get it perfect. That's what I believe the problem was with that watch. There's no other reason why it would make sounds and not work at that level, because I could see it just fitting into the hole. So what I've done here, this is the balance. I'm going to swing over here. I'll cut and swing. So here we have the balance of this beautiful, it's a 992 grade pocket watch movement from Hamilton. It's in brilliant condition. And so what I'll do is I need to make sure that the jewel actually rests on the end pivot here. So I've gone through a process of selecting numerous jewels for this job, and I've sort of got myself down to a few that might work. So let me slide over here for a second. So these are the jewels that I've picked out of my stock of jewels, and I've got a few that might work. This jewel that's with the red mark on it is the original. So when you take the jewel out, you've got to make sure that you know which jewel setting it is, right? And so what I do is I put a little red mark on the top. That way when all those other jewels are sitting beside it, it doesn't get mixed in with them, and I go, oh my God, what setting was it? So, because I think I learned that lesson years ago. So now I put a little mark next to that jewel. Getting waves. I got an overhead light that I use for the watchmaking desk I have here, and it tends to give me a little frequency ripple for this, because it's running at 60 hertz, I think, and somehow the camera is running at X, and then you take X minus X and you get a little bit of a wave going through. So that's how that happens. So anyway, this little red mark is just distinguishing this particular jewel setting with the jewel in there as the one that belongs in that movement. So the closest one I could get was this one here. Now, this has to do two things. First of all, or I guess three things. First of all, the jewel inside has got to fit on top of the pivot on the balance that you saw over on the side here. So just move this, maybe you can see them both. So I'm going to test and make sure that setting fits on top of the jewel itself goes on top of that pivot with minimum side shake. So that's the first thing I need to do. The second thing I need to do is look at the first step on that setting to make sure that the width of that first step fits through the hole that's in the movement. So I'm going to swing this over here. Look at this live action swinging. Hang on. There we go. That's not too bad. You can see the reflection of the camera there. And you get that camera reflection free. Okay, that's a free camera reflection. So there we go. So that, and I think I need to just get this a little sharper. There we go. So that hole there. So I got to make sure that that step drops into the hole. There it is there. That step drops down into there. And first of all, it's got to be the right width. As you can see in my tweezers. So if it fits in there nicely, which I hope it does. If it doesn't, I can always trim it down on a lathe just a bit, which I would do. But I'm only going to do that if at first the jewel itself that's in the setting fits on here with very little side shake. So, because I'm not worried about end shake at this point in time. So I test that for side shake, right? Flip back to the movement, then make sure that it fits inside the hole that's used for the jewel setting. And I don't want to revise this hole because it's the Hamilton sized OEM hole for this particular movement. So you don't want to play with this plate to fit a jewel that you might have found. You want to leave that the same and modify the jewel, or the jewel setting rather. So then I'll take this jewel setting here, the one that you're seeing on the right hand side, not the red one, and I'll throw that in, and I'll measure the width of that step to make sure it's as close as possible to the width of the one that was from the original. And I'll measure the width of the overall setting compared to the, when I say width, I mean how thick it is, right? How thick that setting is. And I'll measure the thickness, I'll say the thickness of that setting as opposed to the diameter. I'll measure the thickness to make sure it's as close as possible to the thickness of the original. And then if I've got that, and I've got the actual right side shake on here, and it fits perfectly into the setting hole, then I don't have to worry about modifying the jewel setting at all. It's a go, right? So if the jewel itself sitting on the pivot here has like, it's too big and the end shake is terrible, then I've got the wrong jewel, right? So, and if I can't find through these other jewel settings that you can see in the bottom here, one that might fit perfectly and be in good working order, the setting that doesn't have cracks, like the one on the very edge here in the bottom left hand side is probably pretty new. I'll make sure that whatever setting I use, the jewel inside is not also cracked or just a little bit damaged. So that's the technique I'm going to use. So what I'll first do is deal with this setting in the end shake, and then or side shake rather, and then I'll do the fitting on this here to see if it fits. If it doesn't fit, but the side shake is perfect when I put it on the pivot, then I might lathe this down to fit inside here with that little lip, and then I'm concerned of the depth of that. So I need it to go in pretty much the same depth as the old one went in, so the pivot sticks up through and just touches the end cap. so you get that end cap touching. So, and it's probably time for a quick drawing just to show you what the end result needs to be. All right, let's draw this baby up. So this is a crappy angle because of the camera for me, but the good news is that you don't really care. So if I have the jewel, let's just draw this with the balance staff coming up this way. Oh, actually I'll draw it the other way. So the balance staff would be coming down like this, and then there would be the pivot on the end, and I won't bother with drawing too much detail, but I'll extend the pivot a little longer than it would normally be, just so for illustration purposes. So the jewel then would be like this, and again, things might not be to size, and there would be a bit of a cup like that for the jewel, and then a cup on this side like so. Right, there's the cup there, and then let me just close this jewel a bit, and you can just pretend that this jewel, if I look over here like that, the jewel is like a big round donut, right, like that. So I'm showing this hole here is this hole here. So now this jewel is sitting in a setting, right? So let me close this jewel down on the end, and I'll say the setting is likely, it's got a step on it. So if the setting goes like this, like that, and there's a step like this, and then the setting goes like, let me see if I can do this properly here. It would go inward. So it would go inward like that, and then like this, and then like that. So there's the setting, and then I'll just draw the line here. So the setting on the other side would be the same. You've got the setting going like this, and then stepped like this, and then down, and then across like that, and then like this, and then over like this. So that's the setting there. I'll just make cross hashes like you would if you were doing a technical drawing. So you've got the setting like this, and the jewel in the middle. And if you looked at this jewel sideways, then you would see it, or the setting rather, sideways. You'd see it like this, and then stepped like that, and then stepped, and there would be a hole there like that, and then up again, and then across, and then stepped, and like that. And this step part then drops in to the actual plate of the watch. So if I look at, this is the plate of the watch, and I'll just make a watch plate like that. That's the plate of the watch, and in the plate of the watch there's actually a hole, so I kind of screwed that up, but let me just circle that up like this and say there's the plate of the watch. Forget that line I drew there. That's the plate of the watch. I can't draw that on the other side, but the same thing happens on this side. And then on top of this setting, then there's a cap jewel that drops in. So this actually would have to go up a bit more, like that, and then up a bit more like this. That's the setting itself. And then the cap jewel would be on top like this. There'd be a setting for the cap jewel, like so, and then the cap jewel is in the middle, and it's touching the end of that pivot right there, right? And there's some screws that would be holding this cap jewel in place, right? So there'd be screws here, and there'd be a screw here, screw head, holding the cap jewel in place. So this crazy drawing. So this part here, arrow there, that's the side shake I was talking about. So that's got to fit in here nicely. You can see I got a lot of space there, but it would fit into here on the pivot nicely. And then right where it touches that cap jewel is where the cap jewel is oiled, and that's the end shake. So you want this situation to be perfect, so that the balance staff does not move in either direction that much. There's always a little bit that moves. And then some of the newer watches, they will have a shock system on the other end that actually pushes this down ever so slightly, right? But on old pocket watches, they didn't have that shock system on the upper end. So what I'm going to do is look at this to see if this hole is the right size for this pivot, and then if it is, I'm going to look at how the setting down here fits into the actual watch upper plate. And if it fits into the upper plate, it's golden, Jerry. It's golden. If it doesn't, then I've got more issues, right? So it also has to have the right the right width for the step is. If this is the setting right here, so this has to be the distance from here to here has to be perfect, and the distance from here to here, the lip has to be perfect. And this is so this drops in absolutely perfect to allow that pivot to set there. So that's my drawing. That's my explanation of what's happening. And we'll just make this one video part 1. I'll publish that right now, and I'll make the part 2 video of me doing the hunt, or maybe I'll just make it all as one big video. What the heck? Okay, here we have the microscopic view of the balance of the jewel in its setting, sitting on top of the pivot. So this is from the top. I'm going to just adjust this slightly, and as you can see from this view, I'm going to look through my lens as well, that there is almost zero problems with play. I'm looking at the side shake here, and the side shake is exceptional. And I can zoom into this, see if I can zoom in even closer with this view. It's a little tricky because you got to move the balance then to be in view of the camera. And as you get closer, it seems to want to go up or down or something, right? So I'm just playing with this right now to get this as close as I can get it. And you can actually see the ring for the light, right? But let me see if I can adjust that. There's the adjustment, so you can see the stud or the tip of the pivot. Excuse me. You can see the tip of the pivot clearly going through the hole very nicely. So I'm going to see if I can just move this just ever so slightly so you can see the movement of it. Yeah, that's exceptional side shake. It's really good. There's not a lot of side shake there, so I think this configuration will work perfectly. I can zoom in pretty darn close to that pivot, but if I zoom out again, maybe take the light down a bit, like that, and you can see this a little bit better. There we go. That's a little bit better where you can see that pivot moving through. I know this is going to be boring people where they're trying to share this with their wives, and their wives are going, "What are you watching here?" But I'm looking through the microscope as well, and I don't see much side shake at all, which is perfect. So the size of the hole here is fitting this very, very nicely. So it's just now a matter of determining whether the actual setting itself will fit nicely into the movement. So we back this off a bit and refocus, and you can see the roller table on the outer side. So I'm using I believe it's a 3 megapixel camera in a microscope. I don't think, no, actually it's a 5 megapixel camera in a microscope, so it's working quite well. So there you go, that's that. I'm going to cut over now to actually look at the plate and the installation. Now I'm going to very carefully remove the jewel from the jewel in the setting from the watch pivot, the balance pivot. So I'll just lift that up. And set that aside. And then I want to put the balance back where it was before. There now I have the balance fitting nicely on top of the balance tack. So now I have the two jewels and settings. This is the old one here, and this is the new one here. And I need to measure the width of that. So as you can see, it looks like the old setting would be more. The base seems to be fatter on here, So the part that drops in seems to be fatter, and the new one, the base seems to be thinner, or just a bit thinner, but the top part that would be resting in the hole seems to be thicker. So there may be a requirement to turn some material down on this, but I'm not quite sure yet. So it could work perfectly like this. I just have to figure out how far the jewel drops down, and I can see this jewel here, and I can see this jewel here, and I'm just not sure how far that jewel will drop down into the hole, because it's not the exact same dimension. It looks like the jewel goes deeper into this hole, as I can see it now, which means that I probably do want this thicker part to drop in more, right? Because then it's moving the jewel closer to the pivot if it drops in more. So it's a game of millimeters here that I need to play. So I don't think measuring the width of these is going to matter, because I think I just need to trial it and see if it works or not. And I need the cap to actually fit on top, so I need to trial this. And just for those folks out there that are purists, I got myself a brand new piece of Rodico here, and so I wouldn't spoil the jewel in any way by introducing dirt into the jewel itself. There's the hole there. So what I'm going to do is take this jewel that looks like a good candidate and just see if it will go into that hole. Got to really watch when you're grabbing the jewel setting here, because you don't want it to fly off and be on your carpet. So I'm just going to see if this fits, or do I need to trim it down. So there we go. Man, that is close. That is so close. It's almost worth just pushing it a little bit with a piece of pegwood to see if it's just that close. So I'm just going to take a piece of pegwood here and push down on it, and I can push it out the other way anyway, so I just want to see how close that is. Yeah, that is so close. Yeah, I think though what I'd like to do is mount it up on the lathe though. Oh geez, I don't know. This is questionably close. It seems to be fitting in there. What I'll do is take a stake. It's a rounded stake, so I can push it from the edge. So as you can see, the stake is conic in nature, so it's like a cone, and so only the edge will touch the edge of this jewel. And I think I do want to tap it, so it's, as opposed to pushing it, because I push it, I'll put undue force onto that area. So but if I tap it, it might work a lot better, but I'm going to have to move the camera just a bit. Alright, so I got the camera moved. I'm just going to put the stake over the jewel like this and tap it a few times and see if that goes in. Here we go. Now I have to look at this from a different angle and pick it up. It looks like it went in a bit. So it looks like I've got a, what do they say, winner, winner, chicken dinner. So as I tap it, I actually take my stake and put it over there, and it's not touching the jewel, it's just touching the edges. And I move it in a circle just to make sure that all edges of that are going through. And I think, as you can see, I'll flip this around, and as you can see from the inside, there it is. It's in position now, and it's tight enough. The lip is there, so all I need to do now is test to see if that jewel actually worked, and I've got good end shake and everything else. So we'll put the balance back on there and see if this works. This will be excellent if it does, by the way. So I've decided just to place the cap jewel on top here. I may have to take some material off this because it's pretty tight. But I'm just going to place the cap jewel on top, and before I screw that in, just to see if this whole rigmarole works. So let's just turn this around and have a look. So first of all, first thing I need to do is wind up the movement a bit, just to make sure I've got some oscillation happening. So I'll just wind that up, like so. And then I will take, again, a piece of pegwood, get rid of my hammer out of the way, take a piece of pegwood, or I'll take a piece of pegwood, and I'll just touch the pallet fork. Yeah, and it's snapping nicely back and forth, so there's no problem there at all. And then I need to mount it on this Myers number 58 movement holder. So I'm one lucky guy, I just bought another one of these, so now I have 3 Myers number 58 movement holders. I'm looking for the seconds hand so I can keep everything away from the seconds hand as well. And it's kind of inside anyway, so it's going to be protected anyway. So just put that in there like that and tighten it up just a little bit, and it's sprung on there, so you don't have to worry about squeezing it too hard. Let me adjust the focus on this too to make sure it's perfect. Alright, so the pallet fork is facing towards the center. So when I put the balance in, I'm going to enter the balance this way and then rotate it like this, and that's so that the impulse jewel can catch the mouth of the pallet fork. Alright, here we go. This is effectively a test run. So this makes me so nervous. I don't know why it does, but it makes me nervous because I think you can screw up a hairspring, you can do all kinds of stuff here to damage a pocket watch when you're doing this. So you got to be really careful. And you just leave the movement exactly where it is, and you use the you basically bring it in this way, and then you rotate, then it should fall into place somehow. There we go, and I gotta see if this is going to fall into place. No, it's kind of off. It's not inside in the hole, and you got to be very careful here that you don't damage anything. So we're going to try again here and see if we can get this going. Okay, so it's ticking away, but I need to make sure this thing is screwed down because I hear some noise and it's ticking. So I'm not sure what that noise is. So let me just see if I can put the screw in here, and it'll just settle things down a bit. So just hang on a second while I do this. Alright, let me listen to it. Sounds pretty solid. I'm going to just move the camera over just a bit because there might be some adjustment that's needed to this movement. I do hear some clicking and ticking. I'm going to also just have a look at the amplitude here and see what it's registering at. So what I do there is just take a slow motion video of the balance as it's spinning. And I'll need to turn this upside down to make sure it runs in both directions. Oh yeah, so we got a very good amplitude here, as you can see. And now I just need to make sure that this thing runs in both directions, and I may have to do some fine tuning, but I'm not quite sure. So I will pick this up out of the movement holder. I'm just moving this camera around a bit and just move it around to see if there's any inconsistencies, because if the pivot drops out of the jewel, then I have to remove material. I think it's going to do that. I can feel it not being tight enough. Yeah, it's working, but I think it needs to have a bit of material removed. Yeah, because when I put it sideways like this, like that, it loses some of its amplitude, which means the pivot is likely just dropping out of that jewel hole. Although it's nice, it's working nicely, but it's got a little bit of issues there. So I'm going to make sure that that's, I may have to chuck this up and remove some material from that. Darn it, though it does work nicely. See, there we go, it stopped. And that's the case when the pivot actually comes out of the jewel hole. Yeah, which means that jewel hole needs to be a little bit closer into the pivot, which means I have to move that material on the lip. So I'm going to take this apart and look at what I can do there to do that. Move the material on the lip. And it's a crying shame that I just can't put that jewel in and it works. Alright, so it's back in its home here. And as you can see, the jewel actually fits nicely, but as I suspected, it needs to be a little closer, coming in more, so that basically, if I just move this in and then refocus, so just put it like this for a second, that's good enough for now. There we go. So here's the explanation. So the jewel fits in here. So this setting with the jewel fits in, but there's too much material on the rim on the outside, so it's not allowing the jewel to be closer to the pivot, which is causing it to jump out or rattle it just a tad. So I'm going to attempt to actually fix that by taking the putting the jewel in a lathe, and I just figure out how to do this, by the way, and removing material from the edge of that. So this is going to be one tricky job. So, see if I can actually accomplish this. So I successfully punched the jewel out. I just used a punch here, and again, you got to make sure this doesn't go near the opening of the pallet fork or the pallet fork at all, because you could damage it. So it's got to be a lot smaller than the hole to punch it out properly. So I've punched it out, and I have the jewel right here, and I got to have a look at that because I'll be removing material from the edge of that jewel. This could be a very tricky job. Alright, here's the two settings and the guilty one. So I've got, this is the old one, this is the new one, and I've just got to remove a little bit of material from the inside of this one here so it drops down further, like this one here. And so I've got to figure out how to chuck that up in a lathe and just remove that ever so slight bit of material there. Because the only way I can do that is in a lathe. So I'll look at my jewel chucks and I'll see if I can find a chuck that sets that up. But for now, so I'm going to leave this as is and make the video. And you know, how to chuck this up and this whole other thing is going to be different. So you saw the thing working, you saw the movement actually working well, but my belief is that the pivot, this wasn't deep enough into the movement, so the pivot was likely jumping out of the hole when I moved it to certain angles. So And the only way to fix that is to move this setting a little closer in, which the only way to do that is to remove material from the inside of the larger diameter lip. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I might videotape it. I'm not sure if I can or not, but that's going to be the trick. But I'll see if I can give you an update on this and see if it worked perfectly. All right, here we go. Here's the explanation for this phenomenon. So what's happened is I've got the this is the jewel itself right here, and this is the setting that the jewel is in here, and it kind of ends here, but you can't see this part here, right? Because this would be the setting of the other one right here, from here to here, the setting of the cap, right? So, and that's the cap jewel right there. So what's happening is that this pivot is not falling in deep enough. It's falling in, and it's enabling the watch to run, but at certain angles it would come out and hit the bowl part of the jewel. So what I need to do is move this in deeper, and likely the pivot here is not showing itself either. So what I need to do then is take some material off right here, take some material off the edge. I wonder if I can draw that somehow. Well, you can see it anyway. So if I take some material off right here around that setting, this will be a bit longer, but it'll drop the jewel down in this direction. So let me see if I can get my pen to work. So this is the jewel, and the jewel will basically drop down in this direction on the plate if I remove material here, because this is the material right here and it's hugging the edge. So you remove a little bit of material there and it's going to drop the jewel down, which will allow the pivot to sit nicely into that hole. So we'll see if I can figure out how to do that on my lathe with a jeweling chuck. But anyway, that's the end of the video for now. Hope you've enjoyed it, maybe learned something, not sure. But please subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions, just ask me at jdwatchservice@gmail.com. I'm a bit busy now, so don't send me jobs to do, because I'm pretty busy at work right now. So I'm just trying to finish off some stuff here, and we'll talk later. Hey, how you doing? How you doing again? So as you can see, this thought was going to be the simplest job in the world. Turned out to be very complex. So it's not as simple as you think. It would have been nice if that jewel fit perfectly and dropped into the right depth, but it didn't. So it fit perfectly, which is kind of cool. So I had to punch it a little bit to put it into the plate, but didn't really put that much force on it. So it fit into the plate. But as you can see in the picture on the right-hand side, this particular, let me see if I can go in here. This one here is the original, and that's the new one there. So the original's got a much thinner top diameter plate on it, and the original is much thicker. So what I need to do is shave some material off of that so the jewel drops down a little further. So that is going to be a very tricky job, and I don't want to put that in this particular video because it's a whole lathe setup, and I've got to do that and figure out whether it's something I have to show or not. Anyway, so that's the problem. But once I remove that material from there, I also may remove some material from the inner diameter so that it doesn't interfere. I don't think it'll interfere with the pallet fork if it drops in further, but you just want to make sure it doesn't interfere with anything from that perspective either. So I have to shave off like probably 0.1 millimeters off of this thing. So 0.09 or 0.1 or maybe 0.11 millimeters off the rim of this thingamajiggy jobby doohickey, this one here, the outer rim, as I've explained already. So I'm going to probably, you're sick of me hearing me explain this, but when you're fitting a jewel like this and it's not an OEM NOS, new old stock jewel, then you've got to play with it and try to make it fit. And that's the watchmaking part of it. So all the rest of it's pretty easy. How to clean a watch, how to disassemble it, how to put it back together, how to oil it, all that. But when you get into this stuff here, it takes a little bit more patience and ingenuity to figure out how to actually repair this. So thanks for watching my channel. Again, if you need to ask me any questions on this, just email me at jdwatchservice@gmail.com. and we'll see what we can do for answering that. So thanks a lot for watching the video, and Max, we're still working on it, man. We're still working on it.